Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. I am, as always, your humble... I don't know, that's probably not fair. No one ever accuses me of being humble. I am your host, TC. For those of you that might just be stopping by because you know who my guest is tonight, welcome to the channel. Probably not going to shock you with anything astounding if you've been listening to Rob for a while. And if you're new, and if you're not new and you're one of my regulars, I have a very interesting guest on tonight. He's Rob. He's the host of the Lone Gunman podcast, and it is a podcast. I think it's probably one of the oldest podcasts I've ever run across. It goes back 9 or more years. I've been binging his show through my favorite podcast catcher, and when he started his first few episodes, he was recording them in his vehicle, and you could always tell too because there was like sounds of squirrels getting run over and small neighborhood children screaming for their lives as he was streaking down the road, not paying attention. I'm kidding, he did not. That's not what happened. But he has greatly improved the quality of his program because he's been at it for a very long time. And so I had to jump ahead and listen to the last couple of weeks worth of episodes to see if he's all of a sudden committed himself to the idea that aliens assassinated John F. Kennedy. So far, he hasn't indicated that he believes that, but we shall find out. But the reason I'm having him on tonight is very little to do with just the assassination itself, but mostly because of the impact that things like the JFK assassination and all the intrigue and the mystery and the conspiracy that surrounds it have had on the modern republic. If you guys thought that Abraham Lincoln had a deleterious effect on the United States Republic, you wouldn't be wrong. It's true. He was maybe one of the worst presidents that's ever graced the United States. But the assassination of JFK set into motion some things that we're still dealing with today by way of the power of the FBI, the CIA, and other federal alphabet agencies. So you guys are going to enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy it. I don't care if you do. So my regulars, I really do this mostly for myself because I'm the only one that'll listen to me. But while you're at it, check out the merch. You guys would love these shot glasses, even if you don't drink. I got the coffee, too, and the beanies. And there again, even if you're in a southern state, you need a beanie. It gets your idea of cold in that neck of the woods, whatever that might be, to my friends down in Florida who feel like they have to put on sweatshirts when it's 50 degrees outside. That's shorts and t-shirt weather for me. So yeah, and head over to my Subscribe Star. I would love to have your support there. It helps keep the internet and electricity going. And boy, with the cost of everything these days, keeping the internet and electricity going is not an easy thing to do. So if you appreciate and value the program and all the series and the different content that I put out, head over there and throw me some support. And while you're at it, subscribe, comment, and share this out. Get us comments, especially if you're watching this afterwards. Comments in the video will drive us up in the algorithm. But we're going to do one thing before we bring Rob in, because I can do that because it's my show. Maybe it's my show. Nothing wants to run fast for me right now. But yeah, we are going to, for the sake of fun, we are going to go and we're going to find Rob's YouTube channel and we are going to subscribe because I just found out that he has a YouTube channel. I thought he was audio only. So here we go, folks. Rob's just sitting there. I'm only stretching this out because he turned the air conditioner off in his studio because he was afraid it was going to be loud. So now I'm just going to make him sweat. We're now this is just to rub it in. Come on. I see. This is what I get for talking smack. Now everything's running really slow for me. And by the way, we're having some weather issues here, so bear with us, if you will. Holy cow! There we go. Sorta. Let's see now. Oh, there we are. See, there we are, folks. As you can see, he's got 1.2K subscribers. He's got 506 videos up, and he is worth a subscription. So while you're waiting for me to bring him on, you guys should head over there and subscribe. Hit that bell icon on his channel, just like you should on mine if you haven't done it yet. And subscribe to the Lone Gunman podcast, and also find him on your favorite podcast catcher. And so, without any further ado, I did all of that to slow down and see if any of your friends would show up. So far, all 4 of them.
Hey, that's about the extent of it. Yeah.
You come well recommended, though, because Richard Booth speaks very highly of you.
Yeah, I think very highly of Richard. He's a great researcher, and he's got his hands in all kinds of pots. So it's nothing but a compliment coming from him.
Yeah, well, and his entire archive is at the Libertarian Institute, and if you say he has his hands in all kinds of pot, I don't know. That could be more true than you understand. So Rob, tell us a little bit about who you are and how old you are, because you've been doing JFK research for over 30 years now. So
yes, I'm 96 years old.
Great. So you actually served with John F. Kennedy in World War II.
Right. No, I am a young 49 and holding. Got started pretty much right around the time that the JFK movie came out back in 91. It kind of sparked an interest again.
Oliver Stone, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the 80s, it was very hard to really research anything. Basically, you could go to your local library, unless you were like one of these dialed in, super freak researchers back then. They were all communicating via, postal mail. So
can't afford to do that anymore.
No, much cheaper to email nowadays and much easier. But yeah, that's about it. Been looking into it for 30 years, been podcasting going on 10. It's 9 and some change now. And yeah, as you pointed out, don't listen to the old episodes, folks. It's very embarrassing.
No, you listen to the whole thing. You don't just jump in the tail end or the middle. You got to listen to the whole thing.
Funny story.
They're great. I love it. It was raw.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back to the beginning of my channel, well, maybe there isn't much improvement. Never mind that. I mean, I've only been at this for 3 years, so you started when podcasting was a thing, but it wasn't something that everybody was looking at doing. And with the surge in podcasting, especially over the last 3 years, because of that particular thing that we've been, that we're not allowed to mention by name here on the YouTubes. because if you say it at the wrong time, they'll demonetize you or ban your video. But a lot of people got into podcasting over the last few years. Some of them just because they didn't have anything to do, and others because they wanted to talk about why we should do everything that the state tells us we should do when it comes to a particular virus. And then there's idiots like me who sacrificed everything to talk about why we shouldn't do anything that the state tells us to do because, well, you can't trust the state, which ties in really well with a lot of your content. There is, as far as I know, you've never come to a conclusion as to who actually orchestrated the entire conspiracy around the assassination, but it wasn't Oswald by himself for sure, and he probably had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Oh, I've solved the case like 30 times now, I think.
That's probably about as many times as I've had people tell me that it was Bush.
Yeah, that's a bad one. But yeah, when you're doing research and you're looking into different aspects of all this stuff, you come to different conclusions at different times, and then you come across something that will change your mind about what you thought before. So, if you're not an honest researcher, you have to stay open-minded. And, if you come across information that doesn't tie into your previous theory, then, you got to be able to evolve and be open enough to admit, I might have got this wrong, and that's a problem with a lot of
the heck you say. You're supposed to admit you get things wrong.
Oh yeah. Some people have a problem doing that, for sure.
Well, I've never been wrong, so.
Yeah, you're not very humble, are you? See,
I don't take me seriously because I don't. So
no, it's all good. I like to have fun, so I planned on having fun tonight, and that's what we're going to do, and inform some people.
Yeah, absolutely. So you, having listened to so much of the show, from when we first met through Twitter, because we actually did not connect through kind of any of the standard ways. We connected because I was going to be covering a story about a young lady who passed, I believe, was how we connected. She passed after a particular medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow you were connected to that story, aware of it from her family or something. And then I was communicating with them, and then all of a sudden I looked over, hey, here's a podcaster that's following me. I got to go check this guy out. I always check out other podcasters to find out if they're going to talk bad about me on their show or try not to be me. That's
I try to follow back all the podcasters that follow me as well. I mean, we should be a tight knit community and support each other when we can. And I read this story, and it was a pretty moving story, very sad and upsetting that something like that could happen. Because of all this bureaucracy and all this other horse shit going on. So, and then I saw, you reach out to them and say, hey, you'd like to tell their story. I thought that was very cool. And so I gave you a follow.
Well, thanks.
And checked out your stuff. So, yeah.
And yet here we are still talking.
I know. Imagine that.
But you're very much a one, and obviously because of the reality of your show name, so people aren't confused, you have gone to great lengths to explain why you call it the Lone Gunman, because it's literally got nothing to do in and of itself with a nod towards Oswald. It has something to do with you.
Yeah. Originally, and like you just said before, it's probably one of the first, if not the first, podcasts about the Kennedy assassination. There were some internet radio shows, if that's what you want to call them,
mm-hmm.
Before me. But as far as a podcast, literally named podcast, I met a buddy of mine, Doug Campbell, on Facebook, and we just clicked instantly. And we bonded in some JFK groups and became really good friends. And we actually met up with each other in 2014, went to a conference, and we thought it would be cool, if we could start our own podcast and talk about it, because we enjoyed talking about it so much. But at the time, I'm recording things in my car. Technology wasn't really...
See, I didn't make that up, folks. It's true.
Yeah, technology wasn't really where it was needed to be for both of us to be able to do a show together. He lives in a really desolate area when it comes to, having Wi-Fi and things like that.
Oh, so Detroit.
Yeah. Middle Detroit. No, he lives in Deerfoot Holler in Tennessee, and it's pretty backwoodsy. Like
you didn't have to say any of the rest of that. All you had to say was Deerfoot Holler.
Yes. So, we said, all right, well, since we can't do it together, then I'll do one, you do one. And then when we can do it together, we'll do it together. So I started my show. He started his show within like a week of each other. And here we are,
now you have a network.
Later. Yeah. We got the Drop D Network. We got the Loose Moose Network. We've both done a couple other podcasts along the way that have come and gone to the wayside. But we started one together, I believe it was 4 years ago now, called Quick Hits. And we do it about once a month. And it's great. We have a great time on there. We keep it real light, laugh a lot, joke around a lot, but we still bring the thunder when it comes to research into the Kennedy assassination. So
the launch for you into this realm, what some people would call, the conspiracy theorist realm, or I guess now we're truthers and whatever. If you ever want to actually talk about the truth of something, now you're a truther and a conspiracy theory nut and a tinfoil hat wearing psycho and all of that. But what really got you going was researching for a paper in high school, correct?
Yeah. I had to do an essay on John F. Kennedy, and of course, back then there wasn't much in the textbooks other than he was the 35th president and he was killed by Lee Harvey Oswald. So I read a couple books from the library, which sparked my interest a little bit. And then, like I said, that movie came out in 1991, and there's no looking back after that. I think when you take a look at the factual accuracy of the movie now, it leaves a lot to be desired, but the general theme of it definitely sparked an interest in a lot of people, and it spurned the JFK Act of 1992, which demanded the release of all the JFK-related documents that are held by the CIA and the FBI and all these other three-letter agencies. And they were all supposed to be released within 25 years, which was 2017. And here we are in 2023, and we still don't have them all yet. So
do you... for all your years of research and then all your years of doing the show and having, solved the case 30 different times, do you feel like you're ever going to get to a place as a researcher and as a podcaster where you're ever going to actually be able to get your hands on any of those documents and really come up with anything formative by way of final decision making? Or do you think this is going to be kept under lock and key for the remaining history of the U.S.?
I think they'll come out eventually. There's a lawsuit happening right now. It's been happening since last year. There's a several group of researchers who are lawyers who are suing Joe Biden. They're suing NARA, which is the National Archives, to release the rest of the documents because the provision was written in, to the JFK Act, that no more than 25 years that all documents need to be released. So they keep kicking the can down the road. Trump did it. Biden did it. And we've gotten a couple things, but some of it was just stuff that we already had that had been redacted that's now unredacted.
Do you think they're pushing it off because there's still people alive who know things and they don't want their names while they're alive attached to it for legal reasons? Or do you think it's so beyond that now where these people are untouchable?
Yeah, I think pretty much anybody who had anything to do with this is dead. Of course, except for some material witnesses who are still alive, like Beale Frazier, like Ruth Payne, like Marina Oswald. They are still alive. But I think it's more what they say is to protect sources and methods, which doesn't make a lot of sense because, if they're still using the same sources and methods they used in 1963, and if they're still using them 60 years later, then we got a problem.
Sources, yeah, but they still use the same methods.
Yeah, the CIA is a funny thing because
the FBI is even funnier.
Yeah. It was back in the 1970s, and people were really looking into what the CIA was actually doing, because there were rumors coming out of the Kennedy assassination, both of them, about our dealings with Cuba and the mafia and our assassination teams and plans and this, that, and the other. And there was, a thought that maybe the CIA was getting out of hand and kind of doing whatever they wanted to do without any repercussions. So, you had the Church Committee in 1975 form up, and then they really took a hard look at some of the budgeting and what the CIA was actually doing, and what there really wasn't a lot of oversight back then. Not that there is now, but
I was just going to say, I think maybe might actually be less.
yeah. At least they had the balls to call them to the carpet in the 70s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they show the Zapruder film in 1975 on national television. And it really, really shocked people to the point where, people were demanding another investigation because what they saw on the Zapruder film did not look like a shot from the back. So that resulted in the House Select Committees on Assassinations. And that was another investigation into the Kennedy assassination and the Martin Luther King assassination. So that committee concluded that there was a probable conspiracy. And they also determined that there were 4 shots instead of 3. But they still did not exonerate Oswald. And they kind of implicated and hinted towards a mafia involvement. So a lot of people like to overlook that investigation and just pound the Warren Commission theory of a lone gunman and a magic bullet and all of this jazz. But to compare what the CIA was doing back in the 60s when it was trying to assassinate Castro and fight communism all over the world and whatever else they were doing, assassinating foreign leaders and trying to change the landscape of the world, really. I find it awfully funny that nowadays you really don't hear much about the CIA at all, or what they're doing at all, or what their budgets are at all. It's almost like they don't exist anymore. They're just an autonomous leg of the government that does whatever they want to do. They have an unlimited budget, but you never hear about them anymore unless something goes horribly freaking wrong somewhere and they can't escape a blame for it. But you just never hear about it anymore.
What do you think the likelihood of some sort of collusion between the CIA and the FBI is in the assassination of Kennedy? Because having listened to your program and and read some other stuff and watched some other things, whoever was responsible for orchestrating it clearly didn't do it alone. But if the FBI had done its job the way it should have done its job, it would have been solved within weeks. And
Very true. Yeah.
and so that to me goes beyond just a willful, or not willful, but just a random negligence. It's almost a willful hindrance of the pursuit of justice in this situation. And you had even one of your more recent episodes I listened to was about the FBI whistleblower type who was talking about the teletype and all of that, and that had come across from Hoover, saying, there's a potential for an assassination attempt on president's life while he's traveling in Texas. And I'm looking at that going, well, this came out allegedly before, and days before, and nobody did anything about it. So I'm looking at that going, it's too coincidental to be a coincidence for me that somebody was way up on top pulling some strings.
Yeah. It's funny. I think when we're talking, we'll do them separately because they are two separate entities and they have two separate agendas. Sure. But to address the FBI first, you have to go back and you have to think at this time, J. Edgar Hoover is in charge of the FBI. And nobody back then made the FBI look bad. I actually came across some documents in which he chastised and punished a lot of probably 30 different FBI agents who were associated with the Oswald and Kennedy case for their lack of action, if you will. And it ran the gambit from being censured, which is basically being scolded, a verbal warning, to write-ups, to firings, to demotions, to pay cuts, to transfers. And it went from everybody from, James Hosty, who was just a local FBI agent assigned to Oswald, to his boss, Gordon Shanklin, the special agent in charge of the Dallas office, all the way up to the assistant to Hoover. And Clyde Tolson was his partner, but he did not escape censure for their role in supposedly dropping a lot of balls when it came to dealing with the assassination and how it dealt with Oswald before the assassination. But all that was never public knowledge, and they would never admit that in public. But looking at the CIA now, they were doing a lot of shady stuff back then that they did not want to get out and did not want to be made public, as far as trying to kill Castro using cutouts through the mafia, anti-Castro Cuban exiles, and all kinds of stuff. And it was basically a giant game of cover your ass between the FBI and the CIA, because
so nothing's changed.
Right.
Nothing at all has
Nothing.
Changed.
Oswald was a defector to Russia, right? In 1959 to 1961.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Those episodes that where you covered that early on are very telling. Very telling.
Yeah, but that's the official story. He was a defector. He went to Russia. He met a Russian girl, got her pregnant. They got married, and then they moved back to the United States. And, back then, the FBI was more worried about the spouse that came back to the United States rather than the original defector being a double agent. They are worried because 9 times out of 10, the person who married them was likely attached to them by the Russian intelligence, to watch them and babysit them. And, sometimes things happen. Sometimes people fall in love, get knocked up, whatever the case may be. But it's awful funny to me that Marina managed to meet 3 different defectors, date 2 of them, and marry one of them in a country the size of Russia in 1959. That's the odds of that happening organically are astronomical. So she was likely sicked on him, hey, watch this guy, do whatever you got to do, find out why he's here, what he's up to, type of thing. And of course, when they come back to the United States, the FBI is tasked to watch them. They read their mail. They know where they work. They kind of keep tabs on them, interview them when they get back. And, all the way up through the assassination in November, before the assassination, they were making contact with his wife. And they didn't know where he was living at the time. They were living separately. And Oswald got really upset that they wouldn't leave his wife alone. And apparently he went to the FBI office and left a note that they destroyed after the assassination. And it supposedly was a threat, like, hey, leave my wife alone or whatever, insert threat here type thing. So very, very odd stuff. But the CIA was up to some very funny things as well. They were funding anti-Castro Cuban exile groups, such as the DRE, which is the Student Directorate of Cuba. Carlos Bernier was a member. This is a guy who Oswald got in a fight with in New Orleans on the street, and then did a television debate with on the air in New Orleans on TV. Who would later hook up with the extreme right wingers like General Edwin Walker, Billy James Hargis, and go on these speaking tours. So very interesting stuff.
When you think back at all the subterfuge and the clinging to the narrative of it being Oswald, that being the official line, I mean, Hoover flat out stated, "You have your man." End of story. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing there, but I mean that was it. He made a declaration to his agents, "You have your man," and that was all anybody was allowed to do then at that point. Do you think that paved the way for the modern way that the FBI conducts operations? Because immediately after that, and Richard Booth, and he talks extensively about the FBI and the CIA having run-ins around Waco leading up to OKC, and or not around Waco, but between Waco and OKC leading up to it, how they had extensive run-ins, like they were ready to bust each other. Or no, the FBI was ready to bust the CIA at Elohim City prior to the bombing in OKC. So every time you look at any of these big stories, they're always intertwined. Sometimes in an adversarial way, but never to the point where the FBI is willing to call them out and say, "That's it, you're not doing this anymore." They back off. It's almost always it comes out that they backed off, and I think we see that with September 11th of 2001. I think we see that in other places, and we also see the FBI using things from the time of the Kennedy assassination on up, like COINTELPRO and PATCON and other versions of PATCON and COINTELPRO. I look at the Kennedy assassination as the FBI really cutting its teeth on its own version of espionage, of intelligence gathering and intelligence operating, because I think it learned a lot from the CIA.
Yeah. I think the best picture of what exactly was going on here comes in New Orleans before the assassination, when Oswald is doing these very out of character things, as far as portraying himself to be this pro Castro, Marxist, Russian supporter, to the point where he's so dedicated, he's handing out flyers to people. He started his own Fair Play for Cuba committee in New Orleans without really permission to do so from the headquarters of the Fair Play for Cuba committee. But you get into all this funny stuff with aliases and subterfuge. I don't see that as a quote unquote FBI plot, if you will. I think if Oswald was tied to the FBI at all, it was under the auspices of being an informant. A confidential informant.
So you think they were using him?
Yeah, I think they were definitely using him, at least in New Orleans.
What do you think he was? What kind of information do you think he was providing?
I think he was providing information on the Cuban exiles there in New Orleans at the time and what they were up to. He was tied very tightly, or at least alleged to be tied tightly to an FBI agent named Warren DeBreeze in New Orleans as a confidential informant for him. We know this from this guy, Arrest Pena, who was also an informant for DeBreeze. And he owned a bar there in New Orleans. And a lot of this stuff came out in the early 70s. And, he pretty much went head to head with DeBreeze on this old TV show, calling DeBreeze a liar and, all kinds of stuff, calling him out basically. Of course, it's his word against his word at this point. There's no official documentation that Oswald was an informant. Now, that episode you mentioned before about the telex and the guy that worked in the office, there's also a story pertaining to some files that were kept in the safe there that he remembers seeing specifically, the name Lee Harvey Oswald. And, that would lead to him being, having some kind of documentation on him. Whether they were watching him or whether he was an informant or something. Because after he was arrested there in New Orleans, while he's sitting in jail, he actually asked to speak to an FBI agent. You don't do that unless
you have some confidence. Yeah, you have some confidence that the FBI is going to respond.
Like, hey, get me the hell out of here type thing. I'm on your side. Or, who knows? You just don't want to draw attention to yourself like that. But it seems like everything that Oswald was doing in New Orleans was to draw attention to himself. And what it looks more like to me was the Bannister operation. Guy Bannister was a private investigator there in New Orleans. He was a former FBI agent for 20 some years. He was one of the first X-Files investigators for the FBI, as a matter of fact, going after UFOs. Excuse me. And he was also the former special agent in charge of the Chicago office. So he was a pretty big deal. Friends with Hoover. But he kept a lot of files on people. And he would frequently use these younger guys to basically do odd jobs for him, run errands, hang up flyers at Tulane, hey, if you're interested in this, come to this meeting. And he would start these files on all these subversives and supposed commies. Now, who he was collecting this information for, I don't know. But, he may have just been amassing it for personal reasons as blackmail or what have you. Who knows? But
the interesting thing to me is this idea that the FBI was managing Oswald, because there's some speculation that Oswald was being managed more than likely as a CIA asset in Russia.
Yeah, you think
so he comes back,
yeah,
and switches management from the CIA to the FBI.
Well, it would seem to me that he didn't do what he was supposed to do in Russia. Because very quickly, his actions are very odd, from the time he stepped foot in the country. He threatened suicide to stay in the country, he slit his wrists to stay in the country. He made a big scene at the consulate there, but never surrendered his passport. But made these big claims like, I'm a former Marine, I have top secret radar information, and I'm going to tell the Russians, The Russians really didn't know what to make of this guy. So, they sicked this woman, Marina, on him. One of their, what do they call them? Was it red swallows? I don't know. There was a movie a couple years ago that kind of tells the tale of what these women did. They were basically honey traps. They would do whatever they had to do to get information from their mark. And, they set this guy up with an apartment in Minsk and wired it for sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And basically kept tabs on this guy the whole time he's in Russia. They figured they didn't know what to make of him. They didn't use him for any intelligence. They didn't try to turn him. They did, he was basically useless there in the eyes of our government as far as information that he could possibly bring back. I think he stayed a little too long over there, but by the time he got back, we have no official documentation of any kind of CIA debriefing. Now we do from the FBI. We know the FBI talked to him when he got back
extensively.
Yeah, but not the CIA. But the CIA was running programs like these false defector programs to try to get somebody in behind the Iron Curtain, get eyes on things as how life really was in Russia. Where's the military installments? How's the government laid out? How do the police act? Things like that. So, this is, before internet, before satellites, imagery, they were flying U-2s up over there, but those things are so high and the imagery you really didn't know what you were looking at. Yeah, you got some pictures, but you couldn't identify buildings on the ground like that.
So you had to have these human assets.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he was more than likely sent there. We don't know this. It's all speculation.
Yes, but there were programs doing that.
But there were programs where guys like him were sent over. He didn't produce, and then he gets handed off to the FBI, which was kind of normal. Like, so here's this guy that defected. And so, yeah, you're going to get run through the ringer, understandably. Yeah, I mean, considering the escalation of hostilities, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. But this FBI kind of takes over managing him. He gets so comfortable with that he calls out for their help when he gets arrested for the assault. But you think that he was probably an asset watching Cuban expats in New Orleans and whatnot. But what was the FBI's interest in watching these expats when these guys were anti-Castro people?
Right, but
why were they so adamant about watching these anti-Castro people? Those were the people we wanted on our side.
Yeah, but they also wanted to know what they're doing. And the CIA had a lot of people in the Cuban exile community, but not the FBI. So, there was a lot of things going on back then. There was training camps out in the swamps on these big plantations that people owned. These secret guerrilla camps where they were training these anti-Castro Cuban exiles to fight. And there were bunkers, armories being broken into, explosives being stolen, guns being stolen and used for these Cuban exile exercises. And, you kind of want to know what's going on and when and if they decide that they're going to strike again. Type of thing. So, it makes sense that the FBI, would want to know this. And, back then the FBI and the CIA weren't really sharing a lot of information.
What? Shock.
You know, I mean, back then you had, Richard Helms in charge, who was, an asshole. And you had Hoover in charge of the FBI, who thought his shit didn't stink. So, you have these two giant entities who thought they were just so great that they really didn't need each other. The CIA is supposed to operate outside the United States. The FBI is supposed to operate inside the United States. And that's the way it was supposed to be. They weren't supposed to coexist in any form or fashion.
In a cooperative way, yeah.
Right.
And so here you have the CIA setting up training camps in the U.S. for Cuban expats, orchestrating the eventual Bay of Pigs fiasco. And
they were wanting to go again.
In wanting to go again.
Yeah.
And the military's on board with this. And
the military just wanted a war. It didn't really care where it was.
No, Rob, no, that's not, I can't believe you would.
They got their war, but it wasn't in Cuba. Yeah.
And the FBI wanted a slice of the action, because they weren't really trying to shut down this stuff. They just wanted to know what was happening.
Right. Yeah. They definitely wanted to know.
Because it wouldn't have been that hard for the FBI to go find these camps. Let's be honest. I mean, Louisiana is a big place, but it ain't that big.
Yeah. Yeah. They were more concerned about keeping tabs on who was where and doing what, and making sure that, our munitions and weren't getting stolen. And boats weren't going out without them knowing, planes weren't going out without them knowing, type of thing. Because there was a lot of that back then.
So ultimately, a lot of these entities are kind of working towards the same goal from different directions. And there was one voice, really, in Washington, D.C., two voices, if you really want to think about it, and both of them end up dead, are JFK and RFK.
Yeah.
That, because it's hard for people to imagine this, because I look at the way people in the U.S. are siding with Ukraine right now, and a lot of it is the ingrained anti-Soviet mentality in the American people. They absolutely believe that we have to be at some form of standoff or war with the Russians, because they're always going to be the evil empire. And that was fostered by our intelligence agencies and the state, the government. They wanted us to feel that way, that communists were bad. And I hate communism and Marxism. I despise them. I think they're horrible systems. I think they're abusive and oppressive and tyrannical, and they're responsible for millions upon millions upon millions of people's deaths in their own country. But Kennedy was taking a softer stance towards the Soviet Union and saying we could work with them, we can befriend them. And a lot of those communities, the CIA, the military, all of that, hated it. They hated that position. They wanted that war footing with the Soviet Union. And his brother, as the Attorney General, was taking a hard stance against organized crime.
Yeah.
So all of these things come together in this perfect storm of, there are a lot of people that wanted JFK eliminated, because in their eyes, that would take all the pressure and heat off of them, and they would get everything they want, from the mafia to being able to control things, to the FBI, the CIA, and the military industrial complex wanting their perpetual war against communism in the world. What are the odds they were all working together?
Well, now that you mention it, when talking about Bobby Kennedy, this guy was the Attorney General of the United States. And that makes him the highest lawman of the land. It also makes him J. Edgar Hoover's boss. And Hoover didn't like that very much. He did not like answering to a Kennedy brother. Believe me.
Hoover had a lot of things he didn't like, and one of them was dressing in normal clothing when he was alone. But
yes. And, Bobby Kennedy had an office at the CIA as well. And he knew a lot of what was going on. The question is...
That's a little out of the norm. I was not aware of that. Bobby had a CIA office?
Yeah. Yep. He had an office at the CIA. And he was very aware of what the CIA was doing as far as, the dirty tricks.
Was that by design, you think, on the part of JFK? Because I know JFK had a very dim view of the CIA.
Yeah, he definitely wanted a babysitter over there because he didn't trust the CIA. So he made it so that, his brother would have an office over there and would have access to certain things at the CIA, whether they liked it or not. Kennedy was working on bringing a new organization into existence called the DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Agency, which may or may not still be around today. I don't know. But he meant it to actually replace the CIA at some point. And I think he's famously quoted as saying he would love to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind. He famously fired Allen Dulles and, was it Cabell? Yeah.
That's Allen Dulles. That's the benefit or of the Dulles International Airport. That's correct, isn't it?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And I live relatively close by. I'm about an hour from Dulles Airport, and it's for somebody like me, it's so ironic to go to that area, which is called Sterling, Virginia, but everything there is Dulles this, Dulles that. You have a mall, Dulles Town Center. Everything is Dulles.
They idolize the man.
Yes, they idolize him. He's named after all kinds of stuff down there.
But Kennedy got rid of him.
Yes, Kennedy fired him because of the Bay of Pigs thing.
Because he was operating as a wild card. No oversight. He was doing whatever he wanted to do, and
exactly. Yeah, Kennedy was not very fond of that. They kind of felt betrayed.
Well, it's kind of his job as the president.
Right. Yeah. But see, they were pissed at him because he wouldn't provide air support during the Bay of Pigs.
Right, because the only way there would be air support, there was no CIA Air Force,
right,
or naval or naval fleet that would allow for carrier support. So they had to get it from that authorization from Kennedy, and he said, "Hell no."
Yeah, these exiles they had going into Cuba during the Bay of Pigs, they just screwed the pooch, man. They screwed it up. Castro knew they were coming, and it was a freaking slaughter. And a lot of these anti-Castro Cuban exiles were pissed at Kennedy for not doing anything. But had Kennedy done something at the time, you still had a Russian presence in Cuba, and you could possibly start World War III.
That would have been seen as an intentional provocation of a Russian ally, of a Soviet ally, who we forced Cuba into the hands of the Soviet Union because we cut them off. We barely just lifted, I think, not even all the sanctions still. But
everybody was all about Castro coming into power and overthrowing Batista, and until he turned communist. He was coming here in the late 50s and hanging out with movie stars and, visiting all the important politicians and going to New York and
fathering what's his name up there in Canada?
Justin Trudeau.
I was trying not to say his name.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Justin Castro. But yeah, I mean, he was a darling, and we had a lot of it was kind of like Las Vegas is now. Back then, it was Cuba.
Yeah, Havana. Havana
that was the place to go.
Huge thing, yeah.
there was lots of gambling, lots of women,
There are
lots
movies
of
made in
debauchery.
Havana.
Yeah. So, but all that went away. Yeah.
So what a surprise! The United States is all on board with overthrowing somebody in Cuba and supporting the person's overthrowing them, and then miraculously turns on the person that they supported when they overthrew the person that they wanted. Folks, this has been going on for a long time. Just keep in mind, we backed Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war. We set up Saddam Hussein. We made him everything that he was. We set up Afghanistan to give the Soviet Union their own Vietnam. Folks,
and Osama bin Laden. Yeah.
And Osama bin Laden. Folks, we do this constantly. So that's why this conversation is so important, is that these are those, and there again, not that it's outside the purview of your show. You just don't talk about this aspect of it as much because you really talk more about the internal aspects of what's happening. But you have to have all this knowledge to understand why those internal aspects are so important. And so when we look around, every time you see the CIA or the FBI and now the DEA and all these other agencies, every time they touch something, the only people that end up getting hurt are the innocent people in another country and the American people. That's it.
Yeah.
We suffer. And we made the Cubans suffer by putting all these sanctions and stuff on them. So they had no place to turn to sell their product, because at the time they were the largest, and I think it's still true, the largest producer of sugarcane in the world.
Yeah.
The Russians were like, oh yeah, we'll take some of that. We'll
Right.
take some of that sugar. And you had pointed out that part of the exchange on that was it like 80% of the payment for their sugar cane wasn't in cash. It was in material, like mechanical equipment.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff to modernize their
infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, hell, even now they're still driving around 1950s cars down there. It's very hard to modernize Cuba nowadays. And I've always said, it's awfully funny that for how many years, 60 years, they tried to kill Castro. And this shit was going on all the way up into the 70s. And they never were able to. So the question then becomes, were they really trying? You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah.
Were they really trying? If they really wanted Castro dead, I think they probably could have made it happen at some point. So the question becomes...
we needed the threat of that communist regime in the Western Hemisphere to justify our fight against communism everywhere in the world. Because if we eliminated that communist regime in the Western Hemisphere, then we were safe. We didn't have to worry about it. There would have been no Venezuela. There would have been, but we had to have the boogeyman of the communist regimes. And there again, I despise communism.
And once the Russians pulled out of Cuba, then you just have this loudmouth yapping down there in Cuba, and nobody really cares. Nobody can go there. Nobody can buy anything from Cuba.
Right.
And it's just forgotten about for all these years, up until recently. Finally Castro passed away, and I don't even know if his brother's still in charge or if he's passed away. I have no idea, or who's even running Cuba now. So, but it's awfully weird. We've had Guantanamo Bay military base on Cuba all these years, but you've been trying to kill Castro. But why? How do we have a military base, a jail, a prison, a black site on the island of Cuba? How is that possible?
That we're enemies with.
Right. I mean, come on now. That's what makes me think, were we really enemies?
Were we really trying to? Yeah.
Right.
It makes for it there again, it just makes for good justification to like, well, we were trying to eliminate this threat, but we just can't. So we got to keep at this war footing. As you're researching and you're looking at the story of JFK, and then ultimately, because it bleeds into RFK, obviously, probably a bad choice of words there, but these stories bleed in together. It's not a coincidence that RFK was assassinated as well. We know they had enemies. Do you believe that set in motion a series of dominoes that really gave the FBI and the CIA kind of a free rein in the U.S. to kind of do whatever they wanted to American citizens, political figures, and almost made those agencies. I mean, if you look around today, we know the CIA knew about September 11th. We know the FBI had been warned about September 11th. We knew, I mean, we know that Waco led to Oklahoma City, and they knew things about those places. Do you think the higher ups kind of get this briefing of, yeah, don't mess with these guys, they'll take you out? Because that, to me, is the message that was sent with the assassination of JFK and RFK. What you don't mess with us, we'll get rid of you, and we have the power to do it because we are the government in their eyes.
Yeah, that's like one of those old George Carlin jokes where the president is elected, and the first thing they do when he's in the White House is sit him down and show him the Zapruder film. Says, "Any questions? You do what we tell you to do." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard that from Carlin, but I could see Carlin saying that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think especially with JFK being the only modern assassination of a president, that could be felt nationally, and as quickly as news travels and TV broadcasts and radio. I think that was definitely a turning point at that point, taking a lot of power out of the hands of the president as far as what he thinks he can do. You know what I mean? And, the tale of the tape just goes on from there. I mean, you have Lyndon Johnson stepping in, right? Everybody thinks, Lyndon Johnson was behind the assassination. He had the Kennedys killed. He wanted to be president, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. Well, if he wanted to be president so bad, why didn't he run for a second term? I'll tell you why. We actually have phone conversations where you can hear Lyndon Johnson calling his buddy and saying, "I just don't know what to do. I'm in over my head. I can't take this anymore."
I mean, he was a slimy bastard. Let's be honest.
He was.
He was a slimy bastard.
Yeah. But, he realized that with that position, especially in the wake of a presidential assassination, a beloved presidential assassination, you have to step up for the nation and be the face of a nation and lead them out of it. And he just wasn't the guy for the job, And so after you have Lyndon Johnson, you get Richard Nixon. Okay. You know what happened with Richard Nixon, the whole Watergate thing, impeached. Then we get Gerald Ford, former Warren Commissioner.
Unelected.
Right.
People have to understand that. Unelected.
Yes, unelected. He was replaced.
Unelected.
Yeah, he replaced Spiro Agnew going into Nixon's second term.
Mysteriously resigned.
Yeah.
Because he saw the Zapruder film.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
But thank you for pulling on those strings, because that's what I'm seeing is that we get a succession of weak, powerless, spineless men all the way up to Carter. And, and let's be honest, Reagan, I'm going to lose people. Reagan wasn't the great president that everybody has made him out to be. He had a lot of slimy crap going on in his administration too.
Oh yeah, I like to refer to him as the White Obama. He was great on the microphone. He knew how to move a crowd. He knew how to say the right things at the right time.
But he was pulling funny. A lot of shady strings behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Ollie North. I mean,
oh yeah.
Talk about a patsy.
Yeah.
A colonel takes the fall for for Iran-Contra, a colonel worked all of that out.
Yeah, no, it was a CIA operation top to bottom, and this is the guy you throw to the wolves.
Right. And Reagan was on board with all of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he had to be. Look what happened to Reagan a year into his presidency.
He got zabrooted.
Yeah. So after that, you're going to play ball? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to play ball.
You're going to play ball. And then they go from being spineless and weak to ultimately kind of a bleed into, I don't want to say it was new, but every single president from that point forward has been in the pocket of the military-industrial complex. Completely in the pocket.
Bought
Left or right,
for.
Republican or Democrat, they are all 100% on board with everything. And people, I've seen people try and compare Trump to JFK, which just makes me laugh. They're not alike at well, except for maybe their philandering, but they're really not alike at all. Trump doesn't have the moxie or the intelligence, and I know he's a billionaire and all of that stuff. But when it comes down to actual intellect, he nothing like JFK, and he completely under the thumb of the regimists. I mean, look at what he did in 2020. He made all the lockdowns possible. He bombed everything they wanted bombed. And
but I think he was in a hard spot, because if he didn't go with the consensus view and things turn bad, then that would be bad for him. You know what I mean?
Because they're so great for him now.
Yeah, but he's like the Teflon Don, man. I do see a little more correlation between him and Kennedy. I mean, they were both independently wealthy, which means they weren't beholden to any.
Sure. Oh, sure. There are definitely some correlations. Don't get me wrong.
You know, they're not beholden to any big corporations, big pharma, anything like that. You know, they both made their money in different ways.
But Kennedy did something that no other president in modern American history did, and he stood up to the machine.
He did.
And so did Robert. Bobby, even after Jack was assassinated, Bobby said, "I'm not stopping.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to accomplish what we started."
Yeah,
and I mean, it was
it was the only thing for him to do. And you know, everybody always asks me, "Well, why don't you cover the RFK assassination?" Well, to me, that is an open and shut case. I mean, it's not hard to prove a conspiracy there. It's not hard to prove that Sirhan wasn't the assassin. You know, you only have to look at the coroner's report to figure out that the shots came from behind him at a very close range. It was likely this guy thinking Eugene Caesar.
Yeah.
You know, and they
who just happened to show up on the security detail just like miraculously.
Yeah, and then he moves to where was he? I don't know, Laos or somewhere, for Thailand or something, until he died. I mean, come on.
Set up for life.
Yeah.
You know, this is why I wanted to talk to you, especially after I started listening to your stuff, because what I'm seeing are I love weak federal government. I think it should all be weak. A weak Senate, a weak House of Representatives, a weak executive branch, and a weak court. I want them all to be weak and powerless. The problem is the president, the executive branch, really is incredibly weak. We see what's happening to former President Trump right now, with the Justice Department going after him allegedly at the behest of the Biden administration. I think they'd be going after him regardless. But we see this. But I mean, like, really, would you have looked at JFK and thought that with him as president, we would ever have someone like a Biden as president? There's no way. There's no way.
He's the biggest joke of a president that I've ever seen in my life. Yet, you know, the mainstream media loves to put this guy on a pedestal and I don't know why. I mean, the guy's old, senile. He shits his pants. He doesn't know where he is half the time. He says ridiculous things. And this is our leader of the free world. This is what you're putting out there as the great American president. I mean, it's a joke.
Exactly. And this is what we've gotten now because our presidents have been weakened. And instead of all of the three branches being weakened equally, we actually have this shadow of control that comes at us through the FBI, through the CIA, and some of these other agencies that really are running things. And I don't say that in a conspiratorial, like, lizard people way, but they really do. I mean, look at, Trump. It's like, oh, we're going to withdraw the troops from Syria. We're not going to be involved there. And the military industrial complex says, okay, Mr. President. And they kept all the troops there. That wouldn't have happened under a Kennedy.
No.
Kennedy would have been like, no, like, look, Bay of Pigs. No, you can't have air support. Who the hell do you think you are invading Cuba in the first place? No, I'm not going to give you air support. Oh, okay, well, we'll kill you.
Yeah. I mean, it was a setup from the get-go. I mean, they never let up on Trump from the day he was even before he was inaugurated, but they never, every time you turn the news on any day during his presidency, it was Trump did this, Trump did that, he's horrible. And then, ever since Biden's been elected, it's, oh, how great he's doing and this, that, and the other. You never hear anything bad about Joe Biden, and that's not even getting into all the other allegations about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and all the creepy crap that whole family's in. I mean, they find cocaine in the freaking White House. Obviously, it's Hunter Biden's. I mean, come on now. What's going on?
I mean, to be fair, as somebody said recently, it's Washington, D.C. Any number of people are probably snorting coke in the White House.
True. But really, who would have the actual balls to do that? I mean,
pretty much any staffer.
Possibly. But, if any place is wired for sound and video, it's the White House. So they know whose it was, I'm sure. That place is probably, there's no hidden corner where you can go, cut some lines up and get down on it,
I'm terribly, just disgusted at the idea that somebody's watching the Biden bedroom.
Ugh.
I don't want to see how Dr. Jill handles that.
It can't work anymore.
God, I hope not. So you've been at this since 2014. 2014.
Yeah.
So you over 9 years now, or 9 years now, and you solved the case 30 times. And
that's right.
So you got at least another 30 solves in you, I would imagine. Where do you see it going and do you said you've already said you've launched some maybe other compared to the length of The Lone Gunman, short-lived shows, but where do you see it going? Do you see some spin-offs where you might start talking about some other aspects, or do you think there's going to come a time where The Lone Gunman runs its course and you shift gears in a completely different direction?
Yeah, I've never thought it would be going this long, to be honest with you. And I've run into some burnout along the way where you just get tired of living and breathing JFK all day, every day, because podcasting is not an easy thing. And, it takes a little dedication. What the people don't see is all of the research being done behind the scenes, all of the reading done behind the scenes, all of the collating of data done behind the scenes.
You never look at anything in the news ever the same way again.
Oh no! I can spot a false flag a mile away now. It's crazy.
So people are always wanting, hey, you should talk about this. Hey, have you seen this? What are your thoughts on that? And I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
And I'm not even famous. So.
Well, you have a little bit more of an open format to kind of branch out into things. I've pretty much pinholed myself into a corner,
Which might actually be a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've done 240 some shows now, and I'm always learning something new. I'm always finding new things out constantly. And, there's been people before me who have researched this thing for 60 years. I'm in contact with a couple first generation researchers who started, in the mid 60s, and they're still dedicated. There's people that have went to their graves doing this and never finding out the truth. Big names. So, do I?
You made enemies too.
Yeah, a few along the way.
And you've coined a phrase that I find incredibly compelling: the lone nutters.
Yes. Well, I didn't coin that phrase. That's been around. I can't take credit for that one, but
you were the first person I've ever heard use it. So
really,
I was going to give you, credit.
There's two sides. You have the conspiracy theorists and you have the lone nutters,
which are actually, in my mind, far more conspiracy quacks. The things that guy would have had to pull off to be able to do that by himself.
Yeah, no, it's crazy when you think about it. When there's absolutely zero evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald was up in that window on the 6th floor pulling the trigger of that rifle at that time. No evidence.
Regardless of what Stanley Kubrick told us in Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
So yeah, talk about two movie producer quacks. Now you look at Kubrick and Oliver Stone and you go, you guys might have been onto something here.
Yeah, I
remember it was cool. It was cool to hate them because they were so allegedly so anti-American, and now you're like, I don't know about you, but I look at them like, okay, maybe you got some things a little wrong, but you guys were really kind of telling us the truth well before anybody was ready for it. Yeah,
for sure. So but both sides are guilty of picking and choosing their arguments, for sure. Then there's always going to be arguments.
Sure.
Now, on my show, sometimes I do it by myself. Sometimes I have a guest. And I don't mind having lone nutters on my show, as long as they can have a civil conversation. Now,
that's hard for them, though.
It is. But I kind of know which ones to stay away from. And there's a handful that I can get along with and have a conversation with where it doesn't end in a shouting match or a pissing contest, which nobody wants to hear,
You clearly don't know much about podcasting if you think people don't want to hear that. That's what,
dude.
People live for that. I try to bring those people on, and they never want to come on my show. They always beg off and tell me, "Oh, you're not important enough. Your show's not big enough for me to come on and debate you." I'm like, okay. All right.
The only video podcast that I ever did was Between the Sons of former CIA assets, who was Jerry Patrick Hemming and Edwin Kaiser. And I had their sons, Philippe and Scott, on my show. And they don't like each other very much. And it was a total shit show. It was just them going back and forth, and me sitting there awkwardly like, what the hell's going on? It was just, I can't believe anybody would sit there and want to watch it. I cringe going back and watching it.
Now I got to find it.
Oh, I can tell you what episode it is, but it's the only video podcast that I ever did. And I've been holding off because I've been mostly audio, and yeah, I got a YouTube channel, but it's not like this. This is fancy to me. I just got theme music like a couple months ago. So, you have great theme music coming in, personalized theme music. I've been doing this 9 years. I just got personalized theme music like a couple months ago.
But you have something I don't have.
What's that?
Lots of useful content.
Oh, well, you'll get there, man. You're 3 years in. The thing is to stay with it. look, I was very discouraged early on. You know, you're sitting there, you do it. The first show I did, you know, I was like, all right. And look, back then, if you, it was horrible because there was no pause button. There was nothing like that. So if you had a brain fart or you screwed up, you couldn't just stop, you know. So very quickly you learn to be like a one take Jake, you know, and back then they were limited to half-hour shows. So I would get to like 25 minutes into doing a show and just have a total brain fart and like, damn it. So I hit the delete button. I'd start over from scratch and start all over again, you know, or 10 minutes
you
into
feel
the
any
show.
better. I've always been a one take person.
Always.
I have maybe in the last 6 months edited like a few where I've stopped and restarted, but for the most part from the get go, you get what you. I was recording on a GoPro and then uploading it, so I mean I just like you get what you get. So
Yeah.
where you go from here and how can people find? I know you're way out there on the Eastern time zone, so I probably kept you way up past your bedtime.
Oh no, I'm good. Where does this go? I have no idea. I don't have the end game in mind. I think when it's time, it'll be time.
You getting invited to conventions?
Actually, yeah. I have the past couple years and declined for various reasons.
Dude, you got to go to conventions. People will love you.
Well, this year at JFK Lancer in Dallas, for the 60th anniversary, I will be presenting at the conference virtually.
That's not going to the conference.
Well, I don't see anybody paying my airplane ticket, so it's going to be virtual. Me and my buddy Joe, he lives up in Connecticut, and we're doing this big show for the 22nd, and we're kind of crunching it down to an hour for Lancer for our presentation there. So we're very excited. It'd be the first time ever presenting at a conference. I've been to many, but never actually presented at a conference before. And you know, in the big scheme of things, there's lots of big names going to be there. So we're very excited to be able to do it, and very honored to be able to be asked.
Are you talking big names in the JFK community, or actual like big names that a lot of people would recognize?
Oh yeah, nobody you'd know. But
oh no, these are big names in our little geeky world, right?
Yeah, that's what I tell everybody. I'm a big deal in certain circles.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like if you knew about the JFK assassination, chances are you've heard of me in my show. Yeah. Chances are. So I'm a big deal in very small circles.
I got recognized at Aldi a few months ago.
Oh.
Guy walks by me, he's kind of like,
hey, aren't you TC?
Well, and you know, I spent almost 13 years in the law enforcement world, but then got forced out because of my podcast, believe it or not. And so whenever somebody starts eyeballing me like that, I'm like, okay, this is, you know, is this somebody that I dealt with, you know, in the detention center? And he kind of comes around the aisle, goes around, comes back down the aisle, and he goes, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. I watch all your stuff.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I'm like, oh, hey, cool, thanks. Because there for a minute I thought I was about to get shot.
Hey, you look awfully familiar, sir.
Yeah, so
you must have me confused with someone else.
Yeah, it's never really. I mean, I've gone to some, you know, rallies and some protests where people have gone, oh, TC's here, and just because it's the circles you move in.
Yeah,
it's the circles you move in, but like nobody else knows, you know. It's just like,
yeah, like I was down in Dallas in 2019 for the conference, right? And I met a listener
just to attend.
Yeah, just to attend, and I met this guy Greg there, and he's like, "Man, I love your show. I listen to you all the time. You know, you want to go have a beer and get out of here?" I was like, "Hell yeah!" So I was like, I don't have a car here. I said, I've been rocking this scooter all around Dallas. And he's like, I'll
I
call
would pay
an Uber.
money to get video of that.
Yeah, he's like, I'll call an Uber. I was like, all right. So we went to this place called Lee Harvey's. It's this freaking, it's a dive bar / flea market / live music venue.
It sounds very Texas.
They sell leather goods and old vinyl.
Oh, that's cool.
And all kinds of crazy shit. And it's a really cool place. And of course it's named after Lee Harvey Oswald. So we went there, we had a couple beers, we ate some hot chicken down there, and it was delicious. It had one of those bathrooms where you go in and you're afraid to touch anything because it's so grungy looking, and there's stickers everywhere and writing all over the wall, and just a trough to piss in. And it's like, okay, all right, I like this. This is cool. So,
I like to go places where I don't feel safe touching things.
Yeah, I got recognized one time in Dallas, so that was cool. But
which is also ironic.
Yeah. I mean, I was wearing a Lone Gunman podcast T-shirt, so I was hoping somebody would recognize me. I got one. I love that dude. He's awesome. But yeah, as far as the show goes, it's over when it's over, and I've got no plans to stop anytime soon.
You got kids that are going to take over for you when you retire?
I got kids, but they want nothing to do with this.
Do they have any idea what you do?
Yeah.
Because I talk to people like, my kids have no idea I do a podcast. I'm like, really? And I'm like,
yeah, I hear about it. I have a 22-year-old and I have a 16-year-old, and of course, 16-year-old is totally clueless. Probably don't even know who John Kennedy is or was or anything. And
that's also ironic.
Yeah, my oldest, and he's just like, oh, doing the Kennedy thing again. Oh. He just doesn't care.
Oh, family, right?
But I do have a good outlook. From doing this, you run into and meet a lot of. Look, when I went to the conference in 2019, I'm sitting in there and I'm looking around, and it looks like a freaking funeral home in there. Like, I'm the youngest guy there, except for Greg. The guy I was meeting. And I'm like, are you kidding? I mean, it was like sad to a point, like everybody looks half dead, old and gray and slumped over and just dead eyed, like, all right, what's the future of this going to be? Is it, once all these old dudes die off, what's going to happen? But, it's exciting to find out that younger people are taking control of some of these conferences, and that's a good thing. And they're inviting not just the normal people who have done these conferences forever, because I came to the conclusion a long time ago after the first conference I went to that really nowadays, in the age of technology that we're in, and the rate that we can share information with each other, we don't really need to go to a conference anymore to find out quote unquote new information like we used to in the 90s and the 80s. Back then, that was really the only way that you could find out new information. Yeah,
that was the only source of new information, that or reading somebody's book if it got published.
Yeah, and if you didn't go to the conference, oh, man, you missed out. You missed out because you didn't hear so-and-so talk about this and that and the other. Or you don't subscribe to this newsletter, then you're missing all this stuff.
Right.
But nowadays, I could share with you 20 different documents in 30 seconds that I may have just found out, and it'd be like, oh wow, that's awesome, I didn't know that. Right. Wow, that's crazy. And the
conferences conventions serve a different purpose now. It is to connect people in a real world sense, where you're not just now sharing information, but you're now sharing life in a way that you didn't before.
Yeah, I always said, or do away with all the presentations. Just rent a hotel out and just set up tables and
open bar.
Food, and just have people sit down and be able to talk to each other with other like-minded individuals.
Yes.
Who rarely ever get a chance to talk about this shit to anybody else, let alone their loved ones or friends.
Right.
You know, because that was one of the things that spurred me to do the podcast, is because, you know, okay, at that point in my life, you know, I had 2 younger kids.
Nobody wanted to talk to you about the JFK assassination.
Yeah, you know, all my friends are dead. You know, like what am I doing? So I'm meeting people in Facebook groups that are like-minded, you know, because like, you can't call your friend up and talk about this, or, you know, my parents didn't want to hear about that. My kids didn't want to hear about it. My girl at the time didn't want to hear about it. So what are you going to do? I mean, I needed an outlet, so I created one.
Right.
And maybe,
which
you know,
is actually the impetus for every podcast. I needed an outlet because no one will listen to me.
Right. And no one listened at first. I mean, I was giddy when, you know, you would get 25 listens on like the first episode. I was through the moon. I was like, really? 25 people are listening to this? Like, what the hell?
I wish I could meet them all.
You know, and then you start doing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 episodes, and you see your numbers start steadily going up, and you're like, now 100 people are listening. Oh, I have 100 downloads, and then you have 1,000 downloads, and then it's like
I intentionally stay off
downloads.
I intentionally stay off my my YouTube analytics so I don't get depressed.
Well, you know, I got upset because when I first got on Spreaker, they included YouTube analytics as part of their analytics. They included YouTube downloads as part of their analytics. And then they stopped a couple years ago for whatever reason. So now every time you listen to me on YouTube, it doesn't help me through
on Spreaker.
So I have to track that in a different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, I can see the views and all that, and I've got the YouTube, whatever it is app, you know, that tells you the more statistics of, you know, how many people watch and how many minutes they watch, whatever. So you got to track that a little different. But, you know, when you combine, you know, your Spreaker analytics with YouTube, I'm probably somewhere in the 1 million download range, which isn't too bad for a pretty niche podcast. You know what I mean?
That's phenomenal.
Very narrowly focused show, you know, and that number blows my mind because, you know, you think, okay, is this real? Are these analytics real? Like
there are people out there being impacted and listening to your stuff. And that actually, that hits in a way that people who don't do this could never understand.
Right.
If you're like me, you'll look at other shows, you'll look at their downloads, you'll look at views on other people's videos and go, wow, that's got a lot of views, or that's got a lot of listens. Other people don't do that. They don't look at YouTube and go, how many views has that got? You know, they just don't do that. And so when you notice that trend that people are listening or paying attention, that hits in a way that's like, hey, wow. That actually, you know, because we don't just do this just for our, you know, for the sake of doing it. We do, but you still kind of want some in kind of a self-aggrandizing way or kind of self-congratulatory way. You do want to be able to go, hey, I put out something that people feel like it's worth listening to and it's worth watching. And it's not just tripe. It's not just, you know, open my mouth and flap. It's information that if people are paying attention, it's going to be really useful, which is one of the things, like I said, about your show. When I ran into you there several weeks ago now and started listening, I'm like, I can use this. Not me, but just by myself. But there's something useful in this, not just in all the research that he did, but in that it's pointing to a greater trend. It's pointing to something that I think we can link directly to the JFK assassination, and that's the weakening of figureheads at the very least. So that now they're not even really figureheads; they're just there to rubber stamp things. Yeah, now they're puppets. Or we'll show you the film. So where can everybody find you so that we can get you out of here? And I should probably go eat dinner.
Oh yeah, you're way late eating dinner.
Oh yeah, I fast during the day, but this is even late for me.
Let's see. Where can people find me? Well, I believe they can find me on iTunes, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on TuneIn
Any
Radio,
podcast catcher, by the
on
way.
Blueberry, any podcast catcher. Yes, you are correct, sir. And anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can. I think I've got this damn show like everywhere. This and Quick Hit. So, if you want to learn more about the Kennedy assassination in a fun, entertaining way, from a real guy who is not pretentious,
and he will rant about the nut jobs in the community too. By the way,
yes, I will rant. I will cuss. I will do whatever it takes. I'm
not the only ranter.
Fluffy old dude with patches on my elbow. You know what I mean? It's it's the new school, and but yeah, and like you said,
Says the old guy
here. Yeah, even on YouTube here, the YouTube, the Lone Gunman podcast channel here, you can listen. But it helps me more if you listen audioly through like Spreaker or iTunes or anything like that. Easier to track downloads.
For a guy who uploads his audio to YouTube and doesn't do it as a video, to have over 1,000 subscribers is for an audio only on YouTube. That's an accomplishment.
Well, it took 9 fucking years to get there. So go me. Finally. Finally, I can monetize YouTube. Hallelujah.
Oh, trust me.
But I haven't yet. So
it'll take a while.
Yeah. But it took 9 years to get that many subscribers. And I was begging for the past year. I was so close. I'm like, all right, it's 900. Come on now. I beg him. Hey, head over to YouTube and just hit subscribe. You beg everybody, hey, leave a review, share the show. Hey, make sure you hit a YouTube. Make sure you hit that follow button, ring the bell, subscribe, whatever. Follow on Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7, on TikTok at the Lone Gunman 7, on Instagram at the Lone Gunman 7, Facebook page, the Lone Gunman Facebook page, on YouTube, the Lone Gunman podcast. And of course, look for Quick Hits, a JFK assassination news and notes podcast as well that I do with my buddy Doug. Yeah.
And you like your your sauce and your women hot but edible is
that actually comes from a Quick Hit show
from your sponsor.
Yes, but it spurns its origins from a Quick Hits episode that we did about a fellow by the name of Dago that I did an impression of, who was apparently friendly with Jack Ruby, who was telling whoever was interviewing him about Jack Ruby's sexual appetite. He would just eat him and stuff. He didn't like to have sex with him, but he would just eat him and stuff. So
boy, that really brings new meaning to your ad spots though on your show. So.
That's episode 14 of Quick Hits. So make sure you go listen to that. You will die laughing. So and I didn't even plan that, TC. I was just free reading this ad, and I was like, I said, Big Bad Bob loves his hot sauce like he loves his women, just not so hot that you can't eat them, And I kind of chuckled to myself, and I was like, that'll work.
Well, Rob, I really appreciate your time, and if you ever got any breaking news or something you want to share, you reach out and let me know.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite, and you've been a gracious host, and thank you very much for having me.
I hope that it was worth your time.
Dude, it's always worth my time.
Well, tell your friends and followers to head over here and watch this.
I was blessed on my way up with the helping hand, and I'm more than willing to extend my hand to others as well. And
I appreciate that.
Get their exposure out there. I'll share the hell out of this show, and
thanks.
Hopefully, blast your numbers through the roof.
That would be amazing, because everything helps in the algorithm. But you get out of here, go do whatever it is.
I'm gonna turn this air conditioner back on.
Go turn that air conditioner back on.
Titties are starting to sweat.
I'm trying to get rid of mine, so that's good. Hey, I was 300 pounds 5 years ago, bro.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the secret?
Keto, intermittent fasting, and I walk my ass off at night after work.
So basically no sugar,
Real low carbs.
Can't eat
Like,
shit.
oh no, I actually I get to eat a lot of stuff that I love actually.
What's your intermittent fasting hours? Or do you change them?
I here, boy, everybody's gonna be loving this part of the show. I drink a Premier Protein in the morning before work. So about 6:30, and then I don't eat again until after 7:30, 8 o'clock, pretty much every day.
Like 12-12.
I not carb up. I tank up on proteins and stuff when I do eat. So, and I take in about 35 to 35 to 40 grams of carbs. So right now I get that by way of Michelob Ultra low carb.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on your weight loss. Dude.
Oh, well.
It's hard to do, and I'm fighting the battle myself. So
saw myself on camera after responding to an emergency when I was still working at the sheriff's office. I looked at my friend who was also a sergeant on the shift, and I go, "Who's that?" And he goes, "That's you." I go, "That fat ass is me." And he goes, "Yeah, that's you." I said, "Time for me to lose some weight."
Yeah, I got a face for podcasting. You're very lucky I'm doing this video.
I tell people all the time I have a face for radio and a voice for emptiness.
Yeah.
So, well, hey, you go get out of here. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and
definitely
share this with anybody you want, and tell them to stop by and say hi, and let them know where they heard about me.
Absolutely will do, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. You go have a good night. Get your air conditioning turned on before you melt into nothingness there.
All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.
See you later.
All right, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rob from the Lone Gunman podcast, and Quick Hits. I think I said that right. You guys, these stories are really important, and that's why I've had Christine from Radix Verum on. That's why I've had Ken Silva on. That's why I've had Richard Booth on. That's why I've had Scott Horton on. That's why I, was blessed to have the opportunity to have Clint Russell on from Liberty Lockdown, and Monica Perez. All these people. This is why I talk to these people. These stories, when you begin to dig into them, when you begin to look at them, none of this stuff happens in a vacuum. There's always something going on behind the scenes. There's always something going on behind the scenes. And maybe, just maybe, the one event in the history of the United States from 1776 until now that's maybe more pivotal than Lincoln winning the presidency and then destroying the republic by crapping all over the Constitution and crapping all over the natural rights of people is maybe, just maybe, the assassination of JFK and then the subsequent assassination of RFK. I know people are, well, they're Democrats and, they're on the left. They weren't. They weren't left-wingers by any stretch of the imagination. They were moderate centrist at worst. They just didn't want to play the game of the military-industrial complex and the espionage state. They just weren't willing to do it. They weren't willing to be beholden to that at all anymore. And they were going to make changes. And that's why they were done away with. And that impact has lasted all these years. Over 60 years that this has been going on. To the point now where our presidents are spineless nincompoops who we can't even call them talking heads right now. Mumbling monsters of disgusting behavior is what we are stuck with ultimately, because they've been weakened by an out of control shadow operation like what the FBI does, what the CIA and other agencies do. And that's what the existence of the show is about, is to talk about these things, because people on the left and the right don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. They all want their positions. They want to hold on to their positions. And they're just going to, whatever the narrative is, as long as I agree with it, I'm okay with it. And then when my people are in power, I'll agree with their narrative. And I'll spend all my time when my people aren't in power disparaging the narrative of the other side. And they're all two sides of the same coin. We're being played, people. We're being played. And voices like Rob are really important because they're exposing things that don't want to be dragged into the light. And what do we talk about so often? The best disinfectant. is sunlight. And that's what Rob's doing. He's bringing sunlight onto a story that has got important ramifications for the continuance of our republic. And the direction that we're headed and where we are right now as a republic all ties back to the assassination of JFK. So you guys need to go over and find him on whatever your podcast player of choice is, the Lone Gunman podcast. And you do need to listen. Listen to from the beginning, because you will hear raw, real thought. And you will hear raw, real research. And it'll be somewhat humorous because he did record it in his car at the beginning, which you can hear the fans running for the air conditioning. It's kind of funny. So, but it's a phenomenal program and has been from the first episode. And so I wish I would have found it sooner. I'm thankful I found it when I did. And friends, like I said, head over to my Subscribe Star. Hit me up if you appreciate the content. If you want to just buy merch, you can email me at mbrrpodcast@yahoo.com, or you can message me on Twitter at Robe Regiment. I'm more than happy to tell you what the cost is and what it costs for shipping. And my friends, as always, as my friend Monica made this for me, fan from here in Minnesota, fight for your liberty. It is yours. Fight for your freedom. It belongs to you. And Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at